Cobalt. And by the way, so I'm going to take this down to a very small nonprofit in a minute here, but these factors play into such public exposure like the Cobalt and the ignition switch, right? So essentially what was happening here is that GM was forced by the government to create cars that went great distances so that they could increase their fuel economy standards. But those cars don't drive a profit. They make those cars simply to keep in touch with the government or stay in accordance with government programs. It's the SUVs that make the profits. And the car organizations will do everything to protect the brand associated with a Silverado or a Ford 150 or whatever. But they don't really care about a Cobalt. The problem with the Cobalt is that the ignition switch was so fragile that if it was hit by your knee or something, it would back off from start or go to this alternate position. And the alternate position would stop the car, but the airbag would not inflate. The airbag was off if it was in this alternate position. It took them years to find this out. And in part, it took them years to find this out, in part because there was a replacement part to fix that ignition switch. But the fellow who was responsible for that didn't change the part number in putting that in that vehicle together. So if you're familiar with BOMs are basically the bill of material to create a car like that. It's thousands of lines long, all different parts. Is that he replaces a critical part, the ignition, and doesn't change the part number. So when they were investigating, why do we have these 100 deaths with this thing? What went wrong with this car? The fact that they changed this part was not creating any kind of a yellow flag or a red flag for them to say, oh, it's the starter, and then to begin to evaluate the airbag issue. So the question is, like as you see on the fourth or the sixth bullet or so, this replacement part intentionally being miskeyed by this fellow. So as these stories came out through the Journal and through the New York Times, it's like, there's another factor, there's another factor, there's another factor. And people knew about this issue in the organization. But again, there was probably this fear of reprisal.